I'm Deb McKinley. Welcome to my bungalow and my bungalow gardens. This is a 1924 bungalow and I've lived here since 2003. When I first moved in, there were not very many gardens out front at all, just the usual couple of shrubs. And so I've really done a lot of expansion here. When I was in high school, I did an interest test and the results came back that I should be a farmer. So I think it's manifesting here in my yard. But also I have a family heritage of gardening as well. My mom loved to garden. Mother of 9, I don't know how she fit it in. I think it was her way of getting away from the kids. Spending time with weeds was much more pleasant than spending time with rowdy children. But also, her father owned a floral business. And so gardening was part of what he did. She grew up with greenhouses in her yard in Alabama. So I think it's just in my blood to do gardening. So what can I tell you about my garden that's interesting? I put in this feature a few years back. It's a dry creek bed. This part of the yard is really hard to deal with the soil. Not very conducive to a lot of kinds of plants. Dry shade is a miserable thing for a garden. And so one thing I decided to do with it was just make it so no plants would grow. And so the downspout comes in and water comes down here. It permeates through the ground on its way down. And it's just this really nice hardscape feature out front in the garden. Not much else to say about the front really. It's pretty shady out here, so not a lot going on. You'll see a ton of hostas. When I first moved in, there was a big scraggly pine tree here. It had really overgrown its spot. People are like, oh, it's so cute for the first 10, 15 years. But it had become this unwieldy thing. And so we planted maple, which everybody in Minnesota loves their maples, so just be careful. It's going to be the next thing that gets massive disease, I'm told, because everybody loves their maples and it's going to spread like crazy. So it's like Dutch elm disease is probably going to happen. So I learned that after we planted the maple, so hopefully it'll be fine. A lot of these hostas came from my friend Tony. He was moving out of his house. He had an enormous backyard in St. Paul, lots of shade, and when he moved out, he's like, hey Deb, now's your last chance to get plants for my garden. And so this would be kind of the tribute to Tony over here. One thing that the postal workers don't realize, the special effort I made for them in the front yard, because their natural path from going from my front door to the neighbors is right through the garden here. So this is actually the postal worker path. It serves no other purpose than to let the letter carrier get through. So in this part of the garden, when we first moved in 2003, there was a concrete path here all the way. And we took that out because it leaned toward the house and brought water into the basement. So I actually put in a French drain so that both drains go into an underground pipe that empties out underneath that space over there, and put in stepping stones instead. Other features in this part of the garden, my grapevine. That was at the house when we moved in, and I make grape jam every fall. I have a mix in my garden of native perennials as well as just other showy flowers and plants. And as you can see, I have milkweed, the native milkweed, to draw monarchs. It self-seeded itself, and I, because of the butterflies, choose to leave it here. It looks a little bit awkward and weird, but every time when it grows out of bounds, I pull it up, and then it chooses to keep coming. And there's actually a study going on right now that says you should actually pull out part of your milkweed, because there's a theory that butterflies actually prefer the younger milkweed plants. So I guess I'm not part of the study, but I'm doing my own study in the yard. As a gardener, I do a lot of overwintering of plants, and so this coleus plant has been growing in various forms in my garden for the last, I don't know, 8 years or more. I do cuttings every fall. My yogurt containers make perfect potting places. I root them in water, and then I give them away as gifts in the springtime, and then also have them for myself. I kept it a pot part of the time, otherwise it would not be nearly this big. You can see one of the ones that was potted that started from rooting last year right there. So another thing I found about myself, I did not know when I started gardening that this was going to become a thing with me, but I realized that I have what I would consider a cocktail garden. I have, this mint was growing here in some form. It's gotten much bigger, but this is my mojito patch. My grapevine, the shrub that I use, is really good mixed with whiskey. And I also grow rhubarb, which has been worked into a cocktail. So there's plenty of cocktail options here in my garden. I didn't realize that I would do that as a gardener, but I do. This year I also discovered pots. I tried to grow basil every year and it would get lost in the garden. I would plant it and I forget everything grows around it. And so my staff person actually said that she grew her some pots. And so I'm like, oh, I'll try it. And it's amazing because this is actually my basil, one of my basils. That's Thai basil. But you'll see throughout the garden, there's a couple other pots, and then I can keep moving them as I harvest them. So the pot thing has worked out really well. And then as things grow and overtake or colors change, I move the pots. They take a lot of watering, but most of the time it's worth it. This is the Garden of Chaos right now. My husband said to me when he saw a friend's garden once, he's like, oh, whatever you do, don't let your garden become like hers. She had what is referred to as a cottage garden, which is really lush and close together. I'm from a big family and I like personal space, so I don't like all my plants to touch each other. So this needs work. Things need to be thinned out here. I found that as a gardener, I actually don't care to remember the Latin or common names of my plants. I have a spreadsheet for that. I document my plants. I also document when they die, so that there's a separate tab in my spreadsheet for dead plants. I actually, when we moved in 2003, there were some elements of garden here, not very much, but I can point out to you some of the plants that were here. And as a lot, actually some of the hostas were the back, I divided them and spread them because they have beautiful fragrance. But a lot of the garden here has been expanded. I just kept increasing it as I got new plants. A lot of the plants, as I mentioned, are from friends. So this is barb. It's actually moonbeam coleus, but not coleus, coreopsis, moonbeam coreopsis. See, I told you I don't remember names of plants. This is barb. And a lot of other plants have come from friends or from plant swaps. As a gardener, I like to give away plants. So if you're watching this and you have some cool plants, contact me and I'll swap with you. As I mentioned, I've learned how to cultivate some plants. So geraniums actually have been with me for 8-10 years more. I dry root them, I bare root them over the winter. So basically I think of them as zombies coming back to life every spring. This plant, I have no idea what it is. I understand it's a Vietnamese herb. 2 owners ago of the house, there was a Vietnamese family who lived here for a really long time. And it just keeps self-seeding and it's a beautiful purple color, so I like to leave it. And occasionally I eat it, but I don't really know how. You eat it fresh, like in sandwiches. Okay. This is, I refer to as my drunken azalea. The Arboretum has a plant sale every spring. And a friend of mine used to organize a tailgate. So a friend of mine would always organize a tailgate at the Arboretum plant sale. And there would always be mimosas. And so after a few mimosas, this is like the most money I've ever spent on one plant. I think it was $65. I could check the spreadsheet. But it's has gorgeous blooms across it in the springtime. And I've managed to propagate it. So it's paying off. Let's see. Wren houses. So a couple years back, I decided I need some other structural elements in the garden. And there is somebody in the Twin Cities who reclaims old wood and turns them into birdhouses. I think it's wood from the hood. But I just love the design on the wren houses. And we've actually had wrens and black-capped chickadees live in them. So not only do they look cool, in my opinion, they've also had residents. Not right now though. Oh. The one I propagated from my drunken azalea. My drunken azaleas, baby. Let's see. Okay. So there's some original elements from before I bought the house in the garden. All of these hostas, which have gorgeous fragrance, and those yellow ones, and plus the peonies. And I've managed to divide these up multiple times and spread them throughout the yard because I apparently need more garden. Although my husband does tell me that he does want to keep some grass, and I think the value of grass is that it's kind of like a mat around a picture frame, that it helps enhance the beauty of the actual garden itself. The lawn has another purpose too. In the springtime, there's lots of dandelions, and I make a point of harvesting and eating those at least a couple of times while they're still young and tender. So I forget that there's a phrase. Oh yeah, so there's a phrase called eat your yard. And so I'm trying to find different ways where I can actually do this. So eating the dandelions out of my grass is one of those. So I planted this hydrangea several years ago. A lot of people really like to trim all of their shrubbery back, whereas I like to have things grow to their natural form and kind of see what happens. And I've occasionally trimmed back, mostly deadheading, but this is the natural form of this plant. At some point, I might not be able to get to the garage door and might need to trim it back further, but we'll see. And so I have another shrub that I don't cut back. This is a burning bush. Who knew they could get this big? Actually, I did, because I looked it up on the internet. And so I actually planted it so it wouldn't grow in the neighbor's yard, and then I always cut it when it does, because it's a little bit obnoxious. But we have St. Francis in the garden here. He came from Craigslist. So a lot of this cement statuary in the garden came from one Craigslist purchase. Somebody was getting rid of their statues, and I was like, oh, I want them. So, they're incredibly heavy, so they don't come back yet in the winter. So this plant is loved by native birds. It's from my friend Anne's garden, and the goldfinch and black-capped chickadees just love the seeds on it. It's moved over time as the bush has gotten taller. It's migrated further to the east so it can get the sun it needs. So this part of the garden, well, entire gardens are always evolving. So why am I going to say this part of the garden's evolving? It's always evolving. Oh, so this is one of the benefits of having pots. We have 2 tomato plants, one that's in the ground, but sometimes tomatoes need to move around because the soil gets weird from tomatoes and they might get more infected or whatnot with diseases. So we were able to just move this pot around. When I tore out way too many phlox and had a bare spot, perfect place for a pot. So as a gardener, I'm constantly assessing what looks good together, what's too crowded, what's moved, what's overpopulated. Phlox always overpopulates. I don't realize it until it's way out of hand. And so this gooseneck loosestrife, not the invasive type, was out of hand here. And so I had to tear out this patch here to make the garden look more balanced. And so I moved some plants around. So there'll always be these awkward kind of dirt look patches as the garden evolves. Another one of my overwintered coleus. Nice. Another one of my geraniums that I overwintered. Proud of myself. Let's see what else. I have, as a gardener, I've killed a lot. I've also had plants that I have struggles with, like this patch of grass, ornamental grass. The marketing must have been really cute for it. It was called Steppables. And so I'm like, oh, it looks so cute in this little pot. And it just looks like a weird hairdo right now. So I've actually trimmed it back a little bit. I'm not a fan, but we'll see. In a couple years, it probably won't be there. But if you want it, let me know. When we had our kitchen remodel a couple years ago, the window had to be resized to accommodate the sink that's on the other side. And so that meant there needed to be a stucco patch. And as anybody who's seen stucco patches knows, they always look bad. They don't blend in very well. So I wanted a window box to kind of hide that fact. And so the contractor wanted to build one out of plywood. I was like, no, that's ridiculous. It's gonna rot in a few years and be ugly. And I found this really great composite one that has drainage holes and actually bolts on into the house. So it's really super sturdy. And it also can be removed in case so if you need to open the door fully for moving big pieces of furniture or something. I'm very much in the experimental phase still. I think I'm only on year 3 of planting plants. So it's fun to kind of figure out what might work here because we get a lot of sun and it dries out fairly quickly. So I have to keep an eye on that. But and it's also super fun in the winter because you can put greenery in it too. And I string lights in here, so it's and solar lights, so they don't need to plug in anywhere. So it's a really nice little addition to the back. So this is, friends have asked me, oh, can you help me plan out my garden? And I'm like, sure. Do you have about 5 years? I can really help you with this. Then every year you buy plants that you like and you carry them around your garden and you kind of go, oh, would this look good here? You'd be like, oh, no, it's too much of the same thing. That doesn't work. I don't want that. So then I would pick it up, carry it somewhere else to see if it would fit in the other space. So that has potential because we have leaf contrast styles going on, different colors. So that might be an opportunity. And plus I have that giant bare spot, so why wouldn't I think about putting it here? So that's kind of my divining rod sort of method where I just carry a plant around and have it speak to me of where it should go. Okay. Here are a couple examples of the fruits of my garden. The mint from the mojito patch. So, a mojito, lime juice, rum, sparkling water, soda. And then this is a sour cherry cocktail. It's got sour cherries, which are from the tree that I planted in the alley garden that my neighbors let me buy a tree and plant there. I was gonna make pastries or something, but somehow it always turns to cocktails. So it has a sour cherry syrup in it, which also has some other liqueurs that I can't remember right now, a lot of lemon juice, and sugar, of course, for the syrup, and then some gin as well. Very, very refreshing. Oh, also with the soda. Okay. So as you can see behind me, the grapevines, they were at the house before I ever moved in. I'm pretty sure they've been here for 20, 30, who knows how many years. I've let them grow along the entire fence line because I harvest the grapes. Every fall, I make jam and pie filling for grape pie. It's all like blueberry pie, but you have to squeeze each grape by hand, both for the jam and the pie. That's where the love comes into the recipes, which makes it extra fantastic. I also use the grapes for making Shrub, which is a vinegar-based beverage as a way of preserving the grapes. It's very popular with the millennials these days, but it's also really great with whiskey. This year I explored making stuffed grape leaves, and those were actually fantastic. They're kind of tedious to make, but well worth it. So as I think about how my garden is integrated with my bungalow, there's the part where when I'm inside the house looking out. So I stand a lot at the kitchen sink, making a mess in the kitchen, and see the views of the garden in the backyard. As my husband would say, it's the best part of the garden because it has the most color, because that's where we have the sun. And there's the views from the various rooms and spaces. But one of the things I love about my bungalow is I have 2 porches, a front porch and a back porch. And so I can lay there on my front porch with the breeze coming through and look out and see my dry creek bed. The best view of the dry creek bed is from inside my porch. The back porch is an amazing utility space. Every gardener brings in a ton of dirt. And so it's a great transition zone. And it's also a place where you need to overwinter plants, or in the fall, when it's just cold snaps and you just need to bring it in for the night and then bring it out during plants out during the day. It's a great transition space. So the fact that my bungalow has 2 porches is fantastic.